Hello and welcome to episode 86 of Linux After Dark. I'm Joe.
I'm Chris.
I'm Gary.
And I'm May.
Welcome back all. It's our annual hopes episode. So we're going to look back at what we hoped would happen in 2024, and we're going to look forward and talk about what we hope will happen in 2025. So Gary, you hoped for more apps that would allow us to federate things and self-host stuff.
Yeah, I'm going to say that this didn't happen, or certainly not in the way that I'd hoped. In as much as I was hoping for some really revolutionary new cool stuff that I could self-host on a server that I'd built, and I just don't think that it happened. I'm self-hosting more or less the same stuff that I was hosting at the time. In fact, there's a couple of things I've even retired since then. So, yeah, I just don't think it happened.
That said, you talked about Image, I think, a year ago, and that has gone from strength to strength and is very, very good now.
It is, but it's still in that pre-beta, do not use this as the place to store your images phase. So, yes, it still exists. Yes, it's really cool, but I still don't trust it to be the only place I store my images. Still paying for iCloud even a year on.
But should you ever trust one thing to be the only place you host anything?
Arguably not, but it's the here be dragons that scares me more than anything else. I mean, obviously they are just files on the disk, right? And I could grab them and put them somewhere else, but I don't trust something weird not to happen and for it to randomly start deleting all of my images. I don't know, man. Like, there's this inherent mistrust of it, and maybe it's also a mistrust in myself.
That's what snapshots and backups and stuff are for.
You are running ZFS on that array, right?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Right?
Yes. Yeah, 100%.
I'm sure that your Btrfs or whatever it is will be fine too. May, you hoped that our good enough options would get better or stay good enough. And you were specifically talking about Mozilla and Nextcloud not getting worse. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't really heard anything from Nextcloud this year. Maybe no news is good news. I know they're putting AI stuff in Nextcloud, but the computer I have it running on is too slow to do any of it. So, I don't know. I haven't seen it. Mozilla, though. Oh.
I mean, laying off 30% of your stuff, that's fine.
And doing it twice, wasn't it? So it becomes more like 50% over the two different, yeah.
They're not going to lose their main income stream anytime soon or anything either, though, because of anti-monopoly or anything. They'll be fine. I think everything's going to be fine.
Look, I'm going to put a positive spin on this, right? I am staring at Firefox now, and Firefox is arguably better than it was a year ago.
I was going to say, there's still a browser, and it still works, and I can still load web pages. That's about my level of expectation from Mozilla at this point.
Well, I think it's probably a little bit faster than it was. It's got some more features that are useful, arguably some that aren't. But I think that it is in at least a marginally better state as a browser in front of me right now than it was a year ago.
I fully agree. And actually, if we didn't know anything about Mozilla, if we didn't follow the news, we'd think everything was just fine. So maybe that's the angle we need to take, is if you just ignore all the news coming out of Mozilla, and then Mozilla is fine.
So head in the sand approach.
Judge them by the product in front of us, the software that they're producing. Maybe that is a fairer way to judge them. Don't worry about tomorrow. Worry about right now. Do we have a great browser? Yes, we do. That's fine.
All right, every American CEO, let's see how that works out next year.
Chris, you hope that AI and ML hype settles down. That did not really work out very well.
No, it didn't. And in fact, everything's just gone nuts. Now, the only thing I can hope is that precipitates an incredible failure, because 2 or 3 times throughout this year, there's been economic forecasts by Goldman Sachs or in the CNN business pages saying investors are getting nervous because they feel like they're not seeing enough of a return. Every dollar that's been thrown at NVIDIA is not going to be made back, and it's a negative. But then suddenly Microsoft will turn around and say, right, recall is going into Windows. We're going for this. We've backed this horse. So I really, really hope it's a case of hubris. And, I just want it to stop. I think it has to explode. I think my hope, it's completely not come true, has it? And I think the idea of it slowing down, what I wanted was it's slowing down to a pace of change where, a bit like the dot-com bubble, the internet didn't just disappear. We cherry-picked the best bits to continue, and then we regrouped and came back with shitter iterations of the web. But each time it did plateau for a bit. I don't think that's going to happen here. I think it literally has to be, apparently the next feature update for Windows will have recall and you'll have to opt out. And I'm hoping that just really goes terribly shit.
See, I think I disagree with you, Chris, or I guess agree with your future view in that I think the hype already is dying down as companies don't just now see, look at this cool AI-generated image I can make, but are starting to find genuine use cases for some of the generative stuff and are starting to understand the risks and rewards and what they should and shouldn't do with it.
Well, we are recording this a little bit ahead of when it is published for scheduling reasons. And so let's just say back in November, OpenAI bought chat.com for $15.5 million.
That's not bubble behavior. That's not, that's fine.
Yeah. I do think that there is some truth to what you're saying, though, Gary, that there are some actual use cases, although they're pretty few and far between. It's very much still shoehorning it into stuff like Apple Intelligence. Oh, yeah, that sounds really great. Yeah. Or the Google stuff. Let me circle this thing in a photo and it'll magically disappear, except it'll just look shit after I've done it. Maybe I'm doing it wrong, but they're just not useful features to me.
But I guess my point is more that there are some companies, and yes, you're right, some of those really big companies that you're thinking of maybe don't have the best implementations, but there are some use cases that are out there that do exist, like sending emails or responding with a certain tone or businessify this thing I've written that's full of swear words or whatever, that do exist and do broadly work okay now, I think.
Or take this list of bullet points and put it into a long form email so I can send it to someone who will then turn it back into a list of bullet points.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That's all stuff that's useful. But I think also the other thing we're starting to see is companies grappling with the morality of it. Like you've got Google's thing, which is change the art. And you've got Apple's thing, which is don't make the art or change the art, but show me what could have been. I don't know.
Apple and Google in being ethical shocker. No, I'm not seeing it somehow. All right, well, I hope that Wayland support would significantly improve on smaller desktops. Significantly is doing a bit of heavy lifting there, but it has improved. LXQt has come quite far with Wayland. It's not 100% ready yet, but it's getting there. XFCE is sort of like just about usable. I know, Chris, you've been messing around with it on Alpine, I think. It's still very, very early, but we have seen improvement there. Not as much as I wanted to see, but there has been some.
So wait, is this just like late night Linux where you're trying to like vie for points? We aren't even competing for points here.
Well, I wasn't going to say that I've won necessarily, but it's clear that I have.
If I knew that, I'd have argued harder and not been so cynical.
No, Mozilla's totally fine, everyone. Don't worry.
As you say, Joe, I have been playing over the last few weeks, actually, partly to do with my job. We've been working on getting remote VNC desktops working after an operating system upgrade and graphical applications running. And it kind of led me down a dbus path and looking at how desktops are built on Linux, how you put them together and run them. And yeah, LabWC is like OpenBox, but for Wayland. And you can, in fact, drop in the config files. The difference between LXQt and XFCE in approach at the moment is that LXQt is compartmentalized, and they have a graphical application now on the very latest release that's just come out, 2.1, where you can pick from a drop down your compositor and all the elements, and it's there. It's not fully formed. Whereas with XFCE, the old joke is that the window manager is not Wayland. And I've been playing around with using LabWC and elements of XFCE, which is what the XFCE devs are doing. They use LabWC as the compositor to work on the panel, for example. So today I installed Arch in a VM and then grabbed the XFCE panel from Git and compiled it from source, which is made much easier by the AUR. And it runs now with LabWC as the compositor, and there's bits falling apart. But I think that's where the difficulty lies, is that unlike LXQt, where you can pull off LabWC, and Raspberry Pi OS, I don't know if you saw that, they put LabWC in there as well, as I think it was Wayfire before, but LabWC is the default now if you install the very latest version. So I think that means that they can move forward more quickly, whereas XFCE are very much on the narrative of, we want to get our window manager ready, and it will be ready when it's ready. We're not just going to use someone else's, which is always going to be the XFCE approach. I would say if I did what I did this week a year ago, it would be much, much more flaky. So there's definitely been some movement towards it.
Right, and so I definitely win. Okay, this episode is sponsored by people who support us with PayPal and Patreon. Go to linuxafterdark.net/support for details of how you can support us too. Patreon supporters have the option to listen to episodes without ads like this. And it's not just this show. There's Late Night Linux for news, discoveries, audience input, and misanthropy, 2.5 admins about system administration, Linux Matters for upbeat, family-friendly adventures, Linux Dev Time about developing with and for Linux, Hybrid Cloud Show for everything private and public cloud, and Ask the Hosts for off-topic questions from you. You can even get some episodes a bit early. We've got a lot going on, and it's only possible because of the people who support us. So if you like what we do and can afford it, it would be great if you could support us too at linuxafterdark.net/support. Right, what do we want to happen in 2025 then? I want XFCE to work with Wayland. So there you go, that's my one. No, actually, mine is very much related to that. I want XFCE to have as good battery life as the likes of GNOME and Plasma, because I've been doing some testing, and as I suspected, the battery life is not very good on XFCE. So I need to complete that testing and report properly on it, which I will have done probably by the time this goes out. It's very confusing to record early. Anyway, that's what I hope. I hope that battery life really improves on XFCE so that I don't have to move to something like Mate, which I probably will have done by the time this gets published.
You'll be on GNOME now, don't lie.
Probably. Yeah, GNOME with Wayland seems to be the winner so far, but I've not concluded my testing yet. What about you, May? What do you want to happen?
I would like several of the encryption features to get better on Linux. I think we're getting close to automatic full disk encryption, like BitLocker style, where you just boot up the computer and when it's off, it's encrypted. I think we're getting closer to that with Ubuntu and using kernel snaps. But I'm also looking for pausable per-user encryption. Pause as in, like, temporarily stop. Systemd Homed is supposed to be able to do this, and I think it's getting merged into the next release of Fedora, so that should be pretty exciting. But basically, being able to sign into your computer and that unlocking your encryption, and when you put the computer to sleep, the encryption locks again, that would be really, really nice. And I think it's really important for using Linux as cyber threats get more advanced or whatever.
Yeah, and traveling to potentially hostile places and all the rest of it, yeah.
And with all of that, I hope that it doesn't lock people out of building their own kernels or make it just prohibitively difficult, because that's where we are right now, where like you have to build a kernel snap and do your signing yourself. I hope there's something to make that a little bit easier, an olive branch to offer to those people, but if there isn't, well, I guess people don't really care about building their own kernel anymore, do they? We should make a show topic out of that.
That'll be as interesting as the licenses one.
I hope that there is a viable, what word do I use these days? Hysteretic, non-read-only, not immutable, something future cloud native, stretchy, twisty desktop version of Debian.
All right, can we have that again without the brain rot?
Yeah. So does that mean you want it to be composable or not?
Yeah, I would like there to be an option to follow a similar path to what George does with Bluefin and Bazzite and Aurora and all of those, but that is not tied to Fedora and Red Hat. if there was a way to do that with Debian, if I could have 2 different root images, or 3 even, of stable testing and unstable, and I could just flip between, or I could change desktop environments, or I could choose to boot testing to be looking at LabWC, for example, and things like that, that would be good. Now, the difficulty there is the fact that it is Red Hat is part of what makes the magic happen, because that requires infrastructure and paid people to be doing things. The advantage, from what I can see, we haven't spoken to George for a while, but Boot C, for example, is going into Fedora, and things that he's done are being taken on board and being absorbed. But I like the Debian ecosystem. I like apt. I like where I've landed. So that would be my hope. But yeah, in the next year, you're probably right, Gary. In the next decade, maybe.
What about you, Gary?
So this year, I hope that x86 hardware can keep pace with ARM. And I think that's something that's becoming increasingly difficult as large tier 1 PC vendors start to build more and more powerful ARM chips. So we've just seen with the latest generation of the Apple ARM chips, for example, that the base model M4 ARM chip can outperform the 2 generations ago Pro chip in certain workloads, mainly single-core CPU stuff. And I really hope that x86 can start to keep pace with that, not only in raw compute, but also in the power envelope and heat and performance per watt on all of those things. And I guess the way that I tie that to Linux is I hope that Linux can keep track with whatever's needed in terms of P-cores and E-cores and everything else to properly schedule workloads in this brave new world we find ourselves in.
Yeah, I completely agree. I really hope this happens, because there's a serious danger that ARM will just replace x86, Intel will just die or start making ARM chips, and we'll just be in this shit situation where Windows is properly supported and Linux is really difficult, because it's not going to be like on servers where there's incentive to get Linux working on it properly. We're going to have community efforts, and that'll just be best effort, like with the M Series Macs.
Well, it's like on your 13th gen i9 chip, right? It's still not a machine that you feel comfortable relying on to record this show, for example.
Yeah.
It's a shame, isn't it? Because we still haven't had, we're very much a laptop orientated podcast, I feel. The stack of laptops has emerged because that is what we gravitate to more than a desktop machine. I think we've all got desktops.
I think more than that, it's just way too expensive to upgrade a desktop as often as we can pick up an old laptop.
Well, this is possibly true, but we haven't had a killer ARM laptop that can run Linux yet. And it is worrying, Joe. I agree with you. I think the Windows ones that keep coming out are underwhelming anyway compared to the Macs, but also you don't feel like, you know, we had Mark on from Lenovo quite a long time ago, but you still don't feel like it is a together computer without someone like the Asahi project taking it on for a specific piece of hardware, which you can do with the vertical integration and the limited number of models of Macs that come out, but you can't do for PCs. Without that, it is just a laptop with broken sound, a broken webcam, and maybe even the NVMe drive isn't detected because it's just not built in the same way. So yeah, I feel like to be able to keep up, I might be about to get a new laptop for work, and I think Will has just got one. And I think both of us have had slightly the same experience, like 14 cores? What? 14 cores, 20 threads? Now, how that plays out makes me nervous. First of all, because I run Debian, so I'm probably going to boot up a clone of my partition. And it's like, what the hell is this? But there is a Debian 13 coming out next year. But I do think you're right. And I think you were just about to say it, May. I think we're getting back to a position where we're a second-class citizen. Oh, this thing runs Windows really well. Now we have to go through and work out how we get some form of Linux going on it.
I think AMD is basically our only saving grace here, because when they do P-cores and E-cores, one, I don't think they mix them on the same SKU, and two, they have all the features of each other.
So it's not an inferior runt of the die.
Right, you don't need to compile your software 2 times, one that uses these instructions and one that doesn't, or switch at runtime or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, and you don't need a scheduler that doesn't pop and click if the equals take some of the workload, Joe.
And the thing that still worries me slightly about the ARM stuff is that even though we do only have, as you said, Chris, very few models of the Mac, still on the M1 Air, one of the first machines that was enabled, you still don't get display out. There's still no webcam. The sound is still not as good as it is in macOS. There's still all of these little things that just aren't there that, to me, make it a usable laptop.
Yeah, and that's no shade on the Asahi project. They're doing the very best that they can, but there's only so much they can do.
Well, it's no different in the ThinkPad ARM one, is it?
Yeah.
That still doesn't have full hardware support. So yeah, no shade on the Asahi project at all. I'm sure it's a really difficult job, but it is a really frightening place to be in this far down the line.
I think we have this conversation every year we do our hopes.
Pretty much, yeah.
We take it for granted, though, don't we, now, that, you know, pretty much any x86 laptop from any vendor will almost always work. I know we had some discussions before about very cheap touchpad manufacturers and how they don't come back after you resume from suspend and things like that. You know, Gary, you've returned a laptop for that, but those occasions are few and far between now. It's a really robust ecosystem. But yeah, when you look over your right shoulder and you're like, yeah, but that thing over there has no fan and gets 20 hours between charges, it's difficult not to feel a bit left behind.
Well, just buy a couple of big power banks and an 11th gen Intel and you'll be absolutely fine.
One strapped to each leg.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just like the Apple Vision where you have like the backpack that has the battery in it.
Please get it right. The Apple Vision Pro.
Oh, right. They're still going to come out with the Apple Vision Non-Pro and it's going to be a great price.
Yeah. Any day now.
Any day now. It's definitely took off.
Right, well, we better get out of here. Do let us know what you hope is going to happen in 2025. You can email us show@linuxafterdark.net. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, but until then, I've been Joe.
I've been Chris.
I've been Gary.
And I've been May.
See you later.